Hey, morning, everyone. Welcome to my super messy home office, which now looks like the rotunda. For this upcoming week, I asked you to read a section of Aristophanes' play known as Lysistrata. Lysistrata is probably the most popular and most reperformed of Aristophanes' comedies because it weaves together the themes of sexuality, of gender and power, and the conflict between all of those things. Now, for class today, asynchronously, I've got two short mini lectures on video. And what I'd like to do in these two videos is to present you with two opposing views of just how seriously we should take Aristophanes' critique of democracy and ideas about leadership. This is because Aristophanes' Lysistrata is a thought experiment, not just about women, but rather what would it look like if we chose to empower the most disempowered members of our society? Would that produce good governance? Could that help us remedy some of our leadership problems? And I think we can make a good case for, but also against the fact that comedy could be a useful medium for answering these sorts of questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll be sort of talking, I think, in the upper right-hand or left-hand bubble as we work our way through these. Okay, first, I'd like you to meet this guy, Aristophanes. Aristophanes is the best-known comic poet of the 5th century BCE. And if you remember last week, I talked a little bit about Plato and what it would have been like for Plato growing up. And you can pretty quickly see that Aristophanes is a bit older than Plato, but he essentially survives the same highs and lows of Athenian democracy in the 5th century. He starts writing around the age of 30, and in the span of his career, he continues to write plays through the Athenian plague, through several wars, sort of the rise and fall of the Peloponnesian War with the Spartans, a couple of government coups, and of course, the trial of Socrates. Now, while Aristophanes will make democracy and comedy a big part of his plays, he actually doesn't appear to be terribly political himself. And it can be hard to know just from reading his plays what his exact philosophy is. There's themes of being anti-war, there's themes of being interested in or sometimes mocking of philosophy, but Aristophanes is not a simple playwright. He doesn't just have one clear message. And that's why in these videos, I want to present a couple of different angles for how we might think about him. Okay, the play I asked you all to read, and I'm going to move this little scroll down so that we can see, yeah, there we go, is Lysistrata. Now, Lysistrata, as I mentioned, is something of a gender bender political thought experiment. It imagines Athens in 411 when the Athenians are enduring a terrible war with the Spartans and it's not going well. And in this play, this thought experiment, Aristophanes imagines what would happen if the women of Athens decided it was time for them to step up and step in to a failing democracy. Now, I'm going to talk about this just a little bit more in the next video, but in ancient Athens, and in fact, no Greek city-states, do women have political power. That's not to say that women weren't important forces in families and societies and culture. Certainly they were. But in terms of voting or controlling state finances, women don't have a say. And that's what makes this play so fantastical and such a fun thought experiment, because Aristophanes is turning the political order on its head. What sort of power will the women take? Well, Lysistrata, whom I'm imagining is this like central woman right here, will argue to the women of Athens that we need to harness our power. And that is, of course, her sexuality. None of us are going to sleep with our husbands. None of us are going to fool around with our boyfriends until the men of Athens have decided to call off the war. And women, as she will go on to argue, have a lot at stake in this, right? Women are watching their sons die, their brothers die, their husbands and their lovers die. And so they feel that they have as much to say about the direction Athens is going in as the men do. Right? So seizing the control of treasury and seizing control of their sexuality, the women of Athens refuse to put out financially or sexually. Now, what I'd like to do now is offer you a couple of reasons why I think we might want to take this play seriously as a blueprint for thinking about the disempowered of a society. The first reason, there we go, click, that I think we might want to take this play seriously is because throughout a lot of his comedies, what Aristophanes will do is use humor to make serious critiques about governance. In this line from Lysistrata, what we hear is a woman's perspective on where democracy is going wrong. So this is the line that Lysistrata will say to the magistrate. Many a time we'd hear at home about some major political blunder of yours. And then when you came home, we'd be inwardly in great distress, but we'd have to put on a smile and ask you, in the assembly today, what did you decide to inscribe? And what did my husband always say? Shut up and mind your own business. And so I did. Here, from Lysistrata's perspective, what she's emphasizing is that as a woman, as a married woman, she understands how the city operates, right? The assembly is the meeting point of the Athenian male citizens. But that when she, a member of the disempowered, right, the disenfranchised, has something to say or has something to offer, she's just told to sit down and shut up. Right. And particularly this is galling because she knows that the men of Athens are making errors, some major political blunder of yours. Lysistrata knows things aren't going well in Athens, but as a disempowered member of society, she's limited in what she can do. And here, I don't think we have to think too hard to imagine Aristophanes as sort of using the voice of Lysistrata to critique where Athenian democracy is going wrong. Okay, I'm going to jump one slide. A second reason why I think we might want to take Aristophanes seriously. Move myself down. At the very time that Aristophanes is writing, we also know that other Greek politicians and thought leaders are writing about and thinking about the political intelligence of women. Now, I want to emphasize that this is not some proto-feminist movement. In most instances, these are kind of the exceptions that prove the rule. But it is striking that in Aristophanes' own lifetime, there are other authors and other people who are imagining what might it be like if we're willing to learn from the disempowered women. So the philosopher Socrates, whom we met last week, in another Platonic dialogue known as the Symposium, Socrates talks about learning from a female philosopher named Diotima. And it's pretty clear that he has respect for her views on love and philosophy. We don't know anything more about Diotima other than what he tells us, but it's striking that one of the most important thinkers of Aristophanes' generation is writing and speaking this way. We also know that in the realm of politics, one of the most important commanders of Athens, a man named Pericles, had a relationship as well with a female philosopher named Aspasia. Pericles was married, he had legitimate children with his wife, but he had a romantic and intellectual relationship with Aspasia, who was an immigrant to Athens, but highly educated and really said to be influential over Pericles in his political thought process. And finally, one author whom we should again recognize, this is Xenophon's, whom we read in relation to Hero. Xenophon too writes a book known as the Economics, which in Greek just means household management, in which he talks about the importance of a wise wife, right? Having a wife who knows how to manage finances, who can direct household servants, and who can be an influential figure for the growth of the city-state. I'm going to pause myself right here. There we go. I just wanted to be a little bit bigger on video. Megalomania. Okay, so first two reasons, Aristophanes is famously critical of democracy. And second of all, we have other people of his generation who are thinking about empowering the disempowered. The last reason I'd like to touch on why we might want to take Aristophanes seriously in his ideas about the disempowered is, of course, the character of Lysistrata herself. I like this illustration of her. It's from Modernity, in which we imagine her bold and nude and sort of commanding the ranks of men and women. But Lysistrata is in many ways an ideal commander. She understands the city-state and what it takes to be a leader. That comes through really clearly in this quote from her, which I'm going to show you, in which she compares leading a state to actually working with wool, which is a traditional task that women managed in the household. So I'm going to jump up here, and what we begin to see is Lysistrata says, look, O magistrate, if you had any good idea of what leadership was, you would know that working with wool is sort of the perfect practice or the perfect metaphor for governing. And he doesn't get it. And so she explains, she says, imagine the citizen body as raw fleece. You start by putting it in a bath and you wash out the dung. Then you lay it out on a bed and you beat out the villains with a stick and you pick out the burrs. Then you have to deal with all the cliques, right? The in-groups, right? The clusters of power who knot themselves together to get chosen for public office. And I'm going to jump down here. Then you cart all the wool into the work basket of civic goodwill, including everyone, immigrants, friendly foreigners, even those who are in debt. This part of Lysistrata's speech is so powerful because she is outlining what it takes to govern a diverse democracy, right? You have to work extra hard to beat out the worst elements of society, right? The villains, the dung, the bad ideas. But it's equally as important that in your work of governance, you bring together all the people from the margins so they feel like members of a collective whole. That, in her view, is the only way to lead Athens back to success and to rebuild democracy for the state. Okay, I'm going to pause myself here and let you guys go. But 3 core reasons for taking Aristophanes seriously: his general critiques of democracy, the fact that others of his generation are thinking about empowering the disempowered, and Lysistrata herself, who in many ways might be the ideal leader, the ideal commander, in his view of the city of Athens. See you in the next video.